Welcome to today's meeting of the Highways and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded, made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Before we begin, can I please remind everyone to only turn on their microphones when you wish to talk or speak. I've received apologies from Mr. Allen and Mrs. Fryer is substituting, and I've also received apologies from Mr. Merry, and welcome and thank you to Mrs. Page for substituting at short notice. And also welcome the portfolio holder, Mr. Ozzy O'Shea, and his cabinet support, Maggie Wright. Minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January 24, I propose that the minutes are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Agreed? Thank you very much. Item 2, I've received questions from Miss Wigginton, Mr. Bellim and Mr. Marriott. The questions and my replies have been circulated to each of the questioners and members of the committee prior to the start of the meeting and will be taken as read. I would like to remind members that there's no discussions is to be held on these questions. I've received one supplementary from Mr. Marriott. Mr. Marriott, would you like to join us? Where can I go? Ask your supplementary question, please.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is that the County Council is not doing enough to ensure that new development is planned and located to reduce the generation and use of cars, and as it will outstrip any conceived conceivable, I can't read my own writing, conceivable increase in road capacity. Will the County Council take a more proactive line to this in future?
Thank you very much. Anne, comment?
I think if I can start, and then maybe Jana might have something to offer or something else to add. I mean, fundamentally, we work within the confines of the policy guidance, both within the National Planning Framework as well as that coming out the Department for Transport. Within that, we, as part of our, because we're a consultee, obviously in the planning process, we don't decide where that development goes. That comes out as a whole host of different factors. When assessed through the local plan process, including constraints such as flooding, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole host of different factors that come into play. But as part of our consultee role, we do always fully consider sustainable transport, how a development would be served, connectivity via walking, cycling, etc. As you know, very recently, we've been working hard with Active Travel England to put in place plans about our walking and cycling network so that when developments come forward, we know the connections they need, and so those moving into those new developments have those opportunities for sustainable transport, and the same goes with public transport. So we do work within those confines, but very much take that holistic view of what's needed to support road users, be those car, public transport, walking, cycling. So we do try and take that holistic approach in our response to the planning authority, who then consider about they take the final decisions through the local plan process and the examination, etc., and where development is cited.
Thank you, Anne. Mr. Marriott, thank you very much for attending and your supplementary question. Thank you. I'll move on now to item 3, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. I've received no questions. Item 4, to advise of any other items which the Chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. I've not been notified of any urgent items. 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Does any member have any interest that they wish to declare?
Mine has been recorded. Thank you, Chair.
Leos? Thank you. Item 6 is declaration of the party whip in accordance with Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rule 16. Are there any declarations of a party whip? No. A presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. there have been no petitions. Item 8 is the first substantive item on the agenda is the Environment and Transport 2024-25 Highways and Transportation Capital Programme and Works Programme. Now, we've all read the report. Before I go to members, is there anything you'd like to add, Anne?
I would just like to add, if it's all right with you, Chair, just you're aware that the report is very much written in the context of we have had very static levels of funding to go into improvements and maintenance across our highways works, which this sets out for 24-25 financial year, the works we intend to undertake across the county. However, very recent announcements with Network North funding is changing that picture. We've had for our maintenance, they call it road resurfacing element of the Network North money. So just to remind members, this is monies that from the cancelled HS2 project is now being invested in the Midlands in the North on highways and transport rather than the HS2 initiative. One aspect of that has been maintenance funding, they call it road resurfacing. What we've seen from that to date and has been confirmed is we had some extra money, 2.258 million this financial year. We've also have 2.258 million additional added in next financial year. Now that is for maintenance element of our works programme. And just to give you an idea of what that means in terms of percentage, across our transport asset management, which you'll see is in the report, we spend in the coming year, we'll be spending just over 18 million. So while the money's hugely welcome, it will not, fix everything out there on our networks. However, future indications are from 2025 onwards, there will be far more allocations for maintenance for us coming. If that happens, if that comes to fruition, we will begin to be able to hopefully slow down the deterioration we're seeing in our network condition out there. One other more recent announcement under the Network North funding, which was just last week, is something called Local Transport Fund, and that is for highways and transport capital improvements, so more small-scale improvements across the network. And again, if that comes to fruition, we may see a slightly, or quite a different capital programme in future years, but will not affect the year that this report is about, which is 24-25. Just remind you, the details of the programmes are in Appendix A and B, and welcome any comments in advance of it going to Cabinet in later this month. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Any colleagues have any comments? Les?
Thank you, Chair. Really, there's may be no surprise following recent events. You've got funds set aside for capital works for flood alleviation. What might that look like? What kind of projects would that look like? Or don't we know yet?
I think there's a huge amount of work commencing and will continue, and sorry, it has been going on from previous things. Obviously, you're referring to Storm Henk and Storm Babette. We've obviously had flooding in the county before that, but nothing on the scale we saw laterally. We have a whole list of formal Section 19 investigations to work through. As many of the members in the committee will know, these aren't quick things because they involve an awful lot of parties, other agency risk management, flood risk management agencies, etc., to understand the nature of the problem and therefore what a potential solution might be. So, I can't give you details at the moment. All I'll say it's work in progress and that will come out over time. We do know, however, there will be substantial amounts of works that will be needed, and how and when we fund those will be a different matter. And equally, it's not for the County Council to fund them all because other parties will be responsible.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. I was just curious what it might look like over time, and clearly it's work in progress, which is fine. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Les. Amanda?
Les has just asked one of my questions, which with regard to flooding. In your intro, you talked very much about the maintenance programme and the extra monies that have been pulled forward off the back of Network North. One of the things that we get loads as councillors in terms of potholes and those kinds of things. And actually, one of the things that I've noticed, particularly in my division, is the repair after repair after repair. Are we looking at more hard-wearing repairs in light of extra funding coming forward? Certainly, there's a pothole that has been fixed 4 or 5 times in my division in just the last few years. So I'm wondering if we're going to enhance the programme we've got by quality or by quantity, and how that balance is going.
I think in short answer to your question is absolutely, that's what we will be looking to move to. In fact, what we'd want to look is the whole asset. So it's not just about looking at the carriageway, we'd look at the drainage in that area at the same time, you know, all the assets, the street lighting, everything that needs done at one time in that. What I would say as a caveat though is, because at the moment, while we've only got an allocation for next funding year and the rest of it, although substantial amounts is promised, we don't know the annual profiles for that. But DFT have indicated it's likely to be backloaded. Now, the likes of the maintenance funding goes on to 2023. So, you know, if it works up then, you know, it could be quite a while till we get substantial money. But when we do get reasonable amounts, because what we'd want to do is more substantial treatments, not just fill in the potholes, but actually redo that whole bit of carriageway, you know, resurface or reconstruct. That takes more money. So maybe later, that kind of treatment may be later in the programme, depending on the funding profile we get through. But it's certainly what we'd want to do, because actually that's where you get the longest life for your carriageway. So the best effect of your money, it's the most effective use of your money to apply it in that kind of way.
And just a supplementary, if I can, in terms of maintenance, there's quite a lot of budget in there about roads, and then there's clearly some things in there about cycling. But one of the things that has really deteriorated rapidly has been the quality of pavement. And actually, you know, if we are really trying to want people to walk more frequently, is, you know, we obviously got lighting issues in terms of reducing the amount of lighting, but actually the surface of the pavements have deteriorated, I think, and we quite often focus very much on roads, but what's going to be the balance between roadway and walkway, pavement, pedestrian access?
Sorry, I don't think I could give you a percentage balance or anything, but what I could say, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll look at Pat, I'll make him do that. But no, absolutely, we recognise, in fact, in the last few years, we've put very little into footway maintenance because we just haven't been able to spread the programme that far. This will allow us to go back to putting reasonable amounts of money in there, because we absolutely recognise, you know, you can't get away from, you can only get away with that for the very short term before you see the impact, and obviously we're seeing the impact across the county, so we will be putting far more resource into footways.
David, did you indicate?
I'm trying to understand exactly what this third element that you mentioned, Anne, is the local transport fund. Because I read in the Mercury that there's £400 million coming to the city and county, which is 283 million is coming to the county. And that was, of course, welcomed by all and sundry, big headlines. But of course, as I understand it, that money doesn't yet exist. It's a promise for the future, way beyond the length of this present government, and it's an indication that at some point over the next 11 years, is it, or whatever it is, a long length of time, funds will be made available. I mean, I find that a bit hard to believe that a government which is going to finish in, say, the autumn, is able to promise funding from then on. But assuming all that comes together and there's a pot of £400 million, now, does this mean that the county and city is going to have to bid into that fund for projects? Does it mean that as members, for example, we will be able to put together a priority list of projects that we would like to see achieved? Or will we be told by the government what projects it will be spent on? I know it's early days yet, but as there's been so many public declarations about how wonderful it's all going to be, and I very much hope it is, could we just have some indication of how the system is going to work, if indeed we know?
Thank you, David. Anne, can you?
Thank you. And I'll just correct you, but unfortunately, it isn't 283 million we've been indicatively allocated. It's 238, although I'd like the 283, but it's 238, just to be clear on that. What we know to date, absolutely right, it's only coming, the announcement was only made last week, and what we know to date is the funding starts from 2025-26 financial year, so April 25 for a 7-year period, so the 238 million is over those 7 years. Again, it's been indicated that the allocations, annual allocations, will be backloaded. The indications are the what we can spend it on is fairly wide ranging. It's capital funding though, but fairly wide ranging across highways and transport. We have to work up a 2-year delivery plan by the end of this year. We will be, and we're now, bear in mind we got the announcement last week, we are now looking at the process of doing that, but there will certainly be an involvement with members, with MPs, key stakeholders, etc. in doing that. We have to the end of the year to come forward with our first 2 years plan. Guidance is expected out by the end of the year, with hopefully the end of March, not the end of the year, that won't help us in putting forward our delivery plan by the end of March, and hopefully that will have the annual allocations with it. We are putting out a briefing note for members fairly soon.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, David. Rosita, you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Hack stole my question because, as you know, I'm very keen on quality pothole repairs and road repairs. But can I just ask a general question? On point 24, we are talking about how much we rely on Section 106. And another one of my soapbox issues is trying to look at a policy in order to get some Section 106 from new logistics and warehouse programs. Have we done any further work? Because I know, we've discussed that. And in my ward, for instance, I know that we have constant road repairs, which are all attributed to too heavy, vehicles. The other thing is, and that's slightly related, but have we featured into our capital programs the cost of future increase of road maintenance, as we know that electric cars are a lot heavier than ordinary cars, and therefore the wear and tear on the road network in future years will even be more substantial. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. Anne?
I'll start, and perhaps Jana can assist on this one as well. In terms of the EVs, absolutely, and you'll see in the report it is highlighted there. Lots of things are changing there, which will cause us more cost in maintaining our network. One of them being number of vehicles and amount we use them, because population growth, if I remember rightly, 23% population growth, we're forecasting, but that affects a 30% increase in vehicle mileage. So we're then, using the roads more, and vehicles are getting heavier. One, we've got more HGVs. Two, EVs themselves are heavier than, the like for like. So yes, that is going to cost us more. In terms of costing that in, no, we get allocations from the government for funding, and we do the best with that we can across our network. So we will with any amount of funding we come in, but it will inevitably cost us more, as the same impacts, for instance, for climate change. More flooding, more heat, etc. all takes wear and tear on the network, and it just costs us more. In terms of Section 106, we do get Section 106 obviously from logistics and that kind of land use, etc. In terms though for maintenance, The only way, in my understanding, that we actually can get some element of contribution from maintenance is during the construction, where we have the before and after information. We know you're going to have so many heavies in there when you're constructing. It's going to take our toll on our road network. And we have before data, and then we have after data, and we have a mechanism then to get a contribution towards maintenance. In terms of the general section 106, you're a new development coming up, be it a housing development or be it logistics, there isn't a mechanism as far as I'm aware, but Jenna will correct me if I'm wrong on that one, in terms of saying for the general maintenance, that's taken as part of the fabric of the services, any development would get.
Thank you. Gemma, anything to add?
No, I mean, I'd agree with what Anne said. We are looking at ways that we can sort of put that evidence forward and gather it more, because I think there are particular areas of the county, and particularly in Leicestershire with the logistics thing we have, that we think it's relevant. But in terms of kind of national policy support for that, we are struggling to do that.
May I come back, please? Very shortly. Is it not, because I have raised this for a long time, because I do see the wear and tear constantly, and as soon as we are filling some potholes, or the edges, they're soon out again. And mind you, farm vehicles do it as well in my area. But is it not possible that as a council we could invest sort of some money in monitoring the road network, especially around large logistics? For instance, as you know, in my division is Magna Park, and so there are 543 acres, already permitted. So we know the road condition now, then there will be constantly warehouses built on spec, no, rather not on spec, on a design and request, and that we can then build on that, because I know the mechanism is there. It is just the evidence we need in order to prove it.
Jenna? Anne?
Yeah, I'm just going to sort of agree with Anne's earlier point. I think for the construction impact of that, I think we're on good ground to do that. And the additional, it does cost to monitor, as you said, and perhaps that is something in key areas we can look at. But I think we would still struggle on the kind of impact of day-to-day traffic then that arises from that development. But it would give us an evidence base to kind of perhaps make arguments about increasing allocations from government in that day-to-day. I think it's worth having the information where we can, and it's proportionate to do so.
Thank you, Jenna. Les?
Thank you, Chair. You partially answered my question, Anne, because you mentioned that there may be an opportunity for members to bid into that fund for localised projects, I guess. So unfortunately, I live in one of the areas where there is a complete LC whip, as in for South Leicestershire. So with that 238 mil, will we be able to kind of mix and match and blend things to do with the LC whip into those capital programmes out of that 238 million? And then I think the other side of that equation, and it will be one that you as senior officers are very familiar with, things like pedestrian crossings, which have to pass the PV test, and would there be any flexibility within that future funding to actually take perhaps a slightly different approach, so rather than just ticking or not ticking the statutory or the guidance levels, to actually say, actually we recognise there's a school and even though the PV values aren't there, there's new developments going to come forward and. So it's just a sort of really broad brush as to how we may be able to use that 238 more.
Thank you, Les. I think Anne got the gist of that. Anne, if you're able to answer that, then please do.
I think in answer to the first point, yes, we're anticipating there will be a wide range of projects and initiatives that we would be able to fund. And I don't see it so much as bidding into, but we'd welcome people putting forward, members putting forward, priorities for their areas for consideration. And, there will be an ongoing dialogue about, what that plan and that programme might look like, so it's going to be an iterative thing and a two-way conversation, or more than two-way conversation. In terms of the point you made around pedestrian crossings, what I would say is not just for pedestrian crossings, for everything, we're open to, as long as it's legal, it's meets highway safety requirements, etc. You know, it's kind of anything can go forward, etc. In terms of pedestrian crossings, and we've had loads of conversations with them, with you and many members and the committee as well, we are actually undertaking a review of our approach to pedestrian crossings. You know that we have had a line where you had to require to meet certain criteria because in our view as professionals, there was clear safety reasons why we wouldn't want to set those aside and say, oh, it's okay, there's lots of community support for this, we'll put it in anyway, because we felt there was safety issues in doing that. We're reviewing that approach. I'm not saying it'll come out with anything different, but we are having a good old review because we've had a lot of discussion around that in many communities. And what I would say is we would seek to work to and apply whatever we put on the ground in line with the conclusions of any such review.
That's great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anne.
David, did you indicate?
I'm looking at the note that came out today. We touched on it this morning in the briefing. This is for £238 million again. And it talks about local authorities outside city regions, in brackets, combined authorities. Well, we're not a city region and we're not a combined authority, but presumably Leicestershire is whatever it is going to be called from now on. This is for a 7-year period from 25-26, but it's going to be backloaded. Therefore, most of the money will be spent presumably in 2031, 2032. I'm just slightly concerned about that because for a project to be worthwhile, for a contract to be handed out, it has to be handed out in its entirety. I can't see how, for example, if you were going to build a block of flats, you can say, well, we'll spend so much the first year and just build the ground floor. The same must apply to major transport contracts. The contract has to be agreed as a totality and not in bits.
David,
So I'm sorry,
but we've not got the money yet.
I know, but
so you can't put a contract in place without money.
All right.
And if you got that.
But sorry, I haven't finished yet. Presumably we wouldn't be spending money on the national highway network, or would we? Or could we spend money on network rail sites, for example, Ivanhoe or Junction 21, which is, they're the two things which spring to mind as immediate needs. Would it be available for those sort of things?
Well, we'll ask Anne if she can answer, but thank you.
Just 2 points then. The first one about the issuing contracts, etc. The idea is we'd understand our annual profiles, therefore we can work out when we can afford what, and equally how much work, advanced work, because for bigger schemes it takes a while to get things in place. If we're looking at a junction improvement or something, we need the design with the feasibility work, etc. So we work that up so we can plan it over that 7-year period. So the sooner we get the annual allocations, the better able we are to work up the necessary resource to understand what we want to deliver, how long it's going to take us to deliver, and therefore what kind of procurement contractual arrangements we need to support that within the confines of the 7-year funding. In terms of can we use it for national highways, etc., there has been indication on what was put out, which was relatively little, that if it was a real priority for your area, you could invest in something like the strategic road network. However, DFT would want to sign that off on a case-by-case basis. And equally, it would mean if we put money into something like that, we're not seeing any transformative, or we're seeing fewer transformative projects on our own local road network. So I would say it would need to be a real priority to our local area. And bear in mind, the minute you do anything in something like the strategic road network, you're talking major amounts of money, not smaller schemes. There's an offset there about your local network. So that's the guidance that's been put out so far.
So Ivanhoe wouldn't qualify then?
There was indications you could look at rail things. They certainly talked about looking at supporting rail stations or hubs in terms of improvements to the station itself. There was a clear indication you could not put it into building railway lines.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. The committee's views on the programme have been sought, and our comments will be captured in the minutes and presented to the Cabinet for consideration. Before I move on, Ozzy, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Anne's explained the situation we're in. We've not got this money yet. Obviously, it will be a godsend to us if we do get it for Leicestershire. I don't want to see it going on national highways. I want to see it going on Leicestershire on the road improvements we have. National highways have their own budgets. So, you know, from my perspective, I want to, if we get this money, I want to see that it improves the road structure and pavements and cycleways for Leicestershire. And it's important that we use cycleways as well, because, you know, the pavements and the cycleways are just as important as the roads. So I'm very happy, but we've got another government likely to come in and they may change things. So it's not sure that we're going to get this money. But obviously, it's been found from the HS2 budget, which obviously was budgeted for. So hopefully, the next government will not, you know, disadvantage Leicestershire from that highway fund.
I hope you're right with that, Ozzy. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to item 9, Special Education Needs Schools Transport Service. It's an update. We've all read the report again. And Pat, is there anything you'd like to add before I go to members?
Just going to highlight a couple of quick points, Chair, if that's okay with yourself. Afternoon, members. So on section 7 of the report, we do talk about the national picture. We've spoken about that before, and that hasn't changed much in what we've seen over the last few years. So the 4 key elements there are in and around demand and growth, specific pupils' needs, market forces, and also the lack of local available places. We then go on in point 9 to talk to detail some findings from the County Council's network report. Some key areas there between 2015 and 2023, EHCPs have risen 115%. Equally, expenditure nationally on SEN transport has increased by 74% in the last 7 years. There was a similar report undertaken by the Association of Transport and Coordinating Officers, ATCO. Those points are covered in points 10 and 11 of the report, but it's got similar findings. So moving into Leicestershire. In Leicestershire, EHCPs have grown over the last 7 years, and the report details the amounts they've grown by. But that has got a knock-on effect in transport, and we have seen our number of pupils rise from 1,551 in 15-16 to 3,031 as of January this year. Between March 23 and January 24, we've seen a 12% rise in pupil numbers. The growth in numbers this year has been higher than forecasted, and that has had a knock-on effect in our budgets. We have seen over 200 more pupils than what we forecasted to have. The transport market is still very unpredictable, and the local markets, we are still having pressures from terminated contracts. 22-23, we had 200 terminated contracts. 23-24, 203. We are continuing to see costs rise, and in points 17 and 18, you will see that what that looks like on a year-by-year basis. Point 19 also goes on to talk about some other factors influencing effective delivery. Late applications. The team received nearly 1,000 applications
that were submitted to the council after the summer holidays had begun. That leads to difficulties in arranging transport and also difficulties in arranging efficient transport. In the past, pre-pandemic, the quieter times that we'd experienced between October and February have not returned. This was a great opportunity for the teams to review the arrangements that had been put in place. But this year, the team have seen 80 to 90 additional or changes in applications every month, adding to their workload. The increase in numbers and the difficulty in market has made this year's delivery extremely challenging. In point 20, we detail the volumes of trips by work stream that the assisted transport team arrange daily. And in a year that equates to over 3 million passenger journeys. For 92% of the pupils that applied on time for transport, transport was arranged by the beginning of the new academic year. And section 21 highlights the processes and the procedures we have to go through. The transformation team supported this year's delivery, but also began a transformation project with us to help support the service. Section 24 highlights some of the work. As discussed at previous meetings and outlined in 24A, we have procured a new computer system that will replace our old system that was out of date and causing significant problems and challenges. The new system is currently in the final stage of test. Training has already started and service users and plans are in place for a launch early April for the service delivery next academic year. This has been a very large, complex piece of work to introduce a new system at such short timescales. The team and the suppliers have worked really hard to make sure that's ready for the new year. The first year will be based on a minimal viable product, which will then be developed over the forthcoming years. Over last year, we also introduced a transport hub. We've detailed that in point 24B. We have continued to promote the use of PTBs and seen a 21% increase in PTBs this year. We also introduced a new contract portal. Now, this is the authority's chosen contract procurement portal. Section 24E highlights some of the work that has been going on with Blaby District Council on a new licensing badge for school transport. This is a trial that commenced last year and is showing really positive signs. And there's been lots of other local authorities interested in it. We've also been working on at a national level as well. And one of the areas have been outlined in point 25, where Anne, our director, has been chairing working groups on some of the challenges facing SEN transport. Moving forward, whilst there is some evidence that cost pressures have begun to stabilise and growth is gradually slowing, it is also evident that the trajectory will continue to rise over the next few years. Controlling this will therefore remain a priority for the council and the team. We will remain focused on delivering effective, efficient, safe transport and looking after the needs for this school year. I've already mentioned our IT system, but the forthcoming year is important for us to deliver, learn and stabilise and prepare for the future opportunities. We will also continue to be customer focused and involve in our customer hub, enrolling our customer hub. We will also review our commissioning practices so that we're constantly challenging the market on cost. We have also proposed to have a dedicated team reviewing our current safeguarding practices to make sure that they are compliant and strengthening and improving the service going forward. We also propose closer links with our children's services team so that we comply with the new guidance that's been outlined in section 5 of the report. And of course, we're developing our own team here in assisted transport. Thank you for your time, members. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Pat. Colleagues, any questions, comments? Hilary.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Pat. It's you may or may not know, I'm the chair of Children and Families Scrutiny, and at every meeting this comes up, the costs of helping these children and families, and to see the figures of the numbers have nearly doubled in such a short time. And how can you plan ahead for this? Any department, and you can't say, oh, well, we'll sort it out for you in 3 years' time when we have more money. It's immediate. And when you look at the statistics nationally, they're horrendous as well. But it does seem at times, and I find this in other reports I get, it's almost where everybody's moving into Leicestershire because we service our residents so well. But it is very, very difficult. I just wanted to say that we are fully aware, or the area I am sort of scrutinised fully, but I really don't know how we're going to solve this. I know you've got plans and it's looking at different ways of doing it, but I think it is a very, very, one of the most expensive sections we have in this council is looking after wholly transport and everything for our children and families. And we haven't even mentioned adult social care. And I think sometimes we need to, there may have to be a realistic look ahead with the families, because in my own area, I know people that get transport that don't necessarily require it to the same level as other children in the same area do get it. So I think it is very difficult. But I just wanted to say, I don't know how we're going to plan ahead, because if it keeps going up at this number, there'll be more children having transport for SEND needs than there will children going to school, normally walking up my road. I'm sorry, I sound cynical, but you only have to look at the statistics and with the new developments and everything. So, but we do appreciate it. I think all of us do around this table, but it is a huge expense. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. I'm not sure you can answer that, but Anne, if you want to comment.
Just going to say, sorry, in that question, I'm not sure how we can answer this or deal with it. Pat mentioned some work I'd done with the Association of Directors of Police, basically, and with the Association of Directors of Children's Services. I ran a webinar yesterday for them, and we did a presentation on the work that we had done. So part of that work was a legislative bit, looking at the existing legislation and what changes we'd want to see from that. And a lot of them touched on exactly what you were saying there about the children at the heart of it, but tailoring it to the needs of the child, not maybe the parental expectation, which is a door-to-door taxi. And, you know, what more we could do on that. We've had conversations with DFT on the back of this work we've done, both associations. We had a meeting with DFE, Department for Education. And their view is very much there's no appetite from ministers in the short term to change any of the legislation, despite the fact that both those associations are saying the legislation is broken and it needs revamped. There's nothing at the moment. The officials of the DFE are willing to work with us, which is really positive on the small scale things. We might be able to affect change, but it's kind of tinkering around the edges until we get some legislative change to change a bit more of the balance between the parental expectations. And the other aspect is it's quite an adversarial system, unfortunately, with EHCPs, tribunals, etc., you know, the balance of that as well. So it's certainly recognised nationally. We had over 100 people on this webinar, so nearly 100 authorities yesterday. So it's exercising authorities up and down the country. In fact, some are saying it's their biggest budget pressure. So there is stuff going on in recognition, but I can't give you an answer as to when. But the other aspect of that work was a toolkit about what authorities have done themselves to help. And we had a really good session with a few case studies of that. One of them was with our district, Blaby, who have done home to school transport taxi license, a specific one. So loads of authorities want to learn more about that to implement that. Equally, there's probably things in that toolkit that we could look at when we are, Pat said, we've got a programme of improvements to make across this system, across the assisted transport service. There's probably some other things we'd want to maybe revisit based on some other authorities' experience. So we're trying to help ourselves, but there isn't an easy short-term answer to this.
Thank you, Anne. David.
Anne and Pat for their presentations this afternoon, and obviously for their grip on the situation. But I think we ought to pick up Hillary's point, and we've got to express some concern about this, because it's, having heard again from Anne on this just now, it's quite clear that everything is moving in the wrong direction. I didn't hear much talk yesterday, the budget, about education anyway, and special education. I don't think I heard a word, and I listened to as much as I could. There doesn't seem to be any recognition at national level of the crises which is impacting local government. We know that we've got Birmingham and Nottingham going to the wall, and they're being followed by others. But if we're going to have to, if we're going to save the county councils and city councils across the country, then there has to be a drastic change. We just can't afford to continue as we are. Something has to. There has to be a radical rethink. And I think if we could just express our concerns today to the cabinet, it will be a first step.
Thank you, David. We are being asked to comment to cabinet, so that'll be noted. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. And I suppose that first of all, we, as councillors, I think we really appreciate the pressure that colleagues are under at county to get all these places in place with a really short timescale. So we do understand just how difficult operating particularly the transport service is. I suppose my question is probably something I've asked before, and it feels still to me, I don't understand in terms of the numbers, in terms of the physical passenger miles and what that actually looks like. Certainly, what I do hear is that lots of children aren't going to their nearest specialist school. They're going to a school much further away. And clearly in ordinary school circles I know personally, I pay for my children to go to school on the school bus because they don't go to the nearest catchment school. That's the reality. So I don't know what work we've done in terms of modelling of where new special schools need to be, where we think where the growth in children that's requiring specialist educational needs, how that looks, whether or not that, I don't get that sense. We look at transport in isolation here at this scrutiny, and obviously Councillor Fry looks at the sort of the higher needs block in the children and families, but for me I don't know where the strategic overview is, particularly because the HCP also has got health sitting in as well. So I'd really like to understand how those strategic discussions are taking place to not just temper demand but actually reduce the number of journeys, because actually if we can get people closer to the educational needs that where the child needs to go to, that actually is the alternative way of dealing with it, i.e. we actually look at how do we look at specialist placements on normal schools, how do we think about specialist units, have we been really pushing about capital investment in schools to actually reduce demand because the children are closer to where they live rather than taking them to a school much further away. And I don't know what work we've done on that. Could you send me some more information on the Blaby thing? I'm really interested about what's been done there. And could you touch on safeguarding and compliance, and how it's obviously 3,000 moving parts, children with very, very vulnerable needs. How does the safeguarding area, how is that going to be improved in the next steps? Thank you.
Pat, are you able? Anne?
Sorry, if I start and then maybe Pat comes on to some of it. You point there about the settings, you know, where is your provision and how far are you transporting? I mean, one of the asks that the work I've just mentioned came up with was that the transport should be considered from the outset, not as a bolt-on, because I think one of the aspects of the HCP process is it's very much what are the child's needs, what's the best setting for them, got that all signed off, over to transport, here you go, you know. And so I think one of the consequences of the HCP process as it was originally set up, and you know, in its current form, it came out from regs in 2014, was very much transport was a bolt-on. So one of our asks is that, you know, that should be rectified in the regs, etc., etc. However, we are, and I'm going to look at Pat on this one a wee bit more, we are kind of trying to get ahead of that locally and having the conversations with our colleagues in children's first. So while there isn't yet the national driver to do that, and it's not built into the system, we're trying to do that, I think, a bit more locally, but Pat's got a bit more detail on that. Certainly I can get the Blavey stuff and sent to you. I've forgotten your other points. I'll hand over to Pat.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. So picking up on the work that we're doing with the Children's and Families team at the moment, there is a project ongoing in Children's and Families team, a T-cell project, that they're looking at placements and EHCPs in particular, and understanding what's the key driver behind the EHCP, what's the key driver then behind the placement of that EHCP, or the placement that's named in the EHCP if one is named. So there's a lot of work going on in that at the moment, and we can get you some details on that. And we do form part of that team. Some of our TU colleagues sit on the board there, and we are bringing transport into that, so it is a consideration. But as Councillor Fryer already mentioned, with regards to how the process works, it then appeals and the way people can challenge decisions sometimes then leads to extensions of transport arrangements and pupils go into further settings so that it does meet the child's needs. But we can get you some details on all of that. Picking up then on the safeguarding piece of work that we'd like to do. So our intention is to review our safeguarding practices and procedures and make sure that we bring them forward for the future. Life has changed an awful lot. This marketplace has changed an awful lot. And what we want to do is just make sure that we are ready to embrace that change and make sure that we are looking at a really, really safe environment for our children to be transported in going forward.
Thank you, Pat. Rosita?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Funnily enough, I had that same conversation some time ago with a gentleman called Ian Sharp as part of the Section 106 that it is featured into that. One very simple question, which I can't get my head around, because as you know, we always get moans and groans, but we also get appreciative comments and how well the system actually works. So what I can't understand, the simple question is, does Leicestershire provide up and above what other authorities provide? So I don't think so, but I'd just like to have that answered, because somebody once said to me, you know, we're doing a really good job. And my other comment is just, it's a Blavey toolkit, which is somewhere in there, point E. Now, yesterday I was watching the news, and bear with me, on the back of 30 years ago, an incident on with a bus. There was a lot of lobbying which introduced seat belts to be worn on buses, and this lobbying has started again to take some momentum. And now there are some MPs who are working really actively to introduce operators license for volunteer drivers, for school bus drivers and whatever. And it put the fear of God into me, because my community thrives on having volunteer transport, and we are struggling to get volunteer drivers anyway. So if they were to have an operator's license, that would be it. That would be death. So I was wondering if this, because this sounds really good and it's a big innovative scheme, whether that can be sort of enhanced, rolled out to maybe other volunteer sectors or whatever, because that is already a good basis to ensure safety. So if you can talk me around it, because I think that's a brilliant idea, and I think we ought to move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosita. Anne?
I think if I come on the first point and then Pat will come on the second point, if that's all right. Your question about how are we in comparison with other local authorities? Obviously, we have to operate within the legislation, so we have a statutory duty to provide, home to school if you're eligible, etc., etc. Where the difficulty in answering your question comes from, it's up to us to interpret that legislation and provide that service in the best way. It doesn't say you've got to provide transport by doing A, B, C, and D. It's you've got to provide this. You've got to provide or facilitate a child getting to school, etc. How we do that is then up to us, how we interpret that. So each authority will interpret that slightly differently over time. And as you know, because we've had cost pressures for years, growth and cost pressures, we're looking at doing that as the most efficient way we possibly can. So just to, for instance, just to give you some ideas, obviously you've got the traditional door-to-door transport. So we then look at how do we route people? Can we put them on multiple transport, etc., or does it have to be a solo vehicle? Are we going out to the private market, or can we provide it on one of our own in-house fleet, because we do provide in-house as well, and we look at the most efficient mechanism to do that. Also, there's things like, and it does depend on your assessment and your criteria, etc., whether you're eligible for whether a PTB would be better for you. And we have voluntary ones for the ones that come within the statutory age groups. We also do post-16. You'll know our policy is for SEN a default PTB, personal transport budget. We've gone further than most authorities. They haven't done that. So we differ in that respect. But for instance, again, I'm sorry to harp on about it, but this webinar I did yesterday, one of the case studies was one of the authorities and what they have done on independent travel training. This is something we do as well, but equally, I think they've taken it as a step forward. How you work with families and young people to make sure they're independent and they could, for instance, use a bus with a bit of support, so they don't need door-to-door transport, etc. So it's hard to say we do more, we do less, we're better, we're worse than other authorities. It's about how you take each of those measures, interpret them and implement them for your cohort of people you're transporting or facilitating transport for. So sorry, it's not a straightforward answer. We're constantly looking at improving our services and keeping costs down within our financial envelope. And again, learning from others as well, because others have looked at us, for instance, on our PTB approach. We will look at others to learn from them as well. So we're not all reinventing the wheel.
Thank you, Anne. Pat, anything to add?
I was just going to pick up the question with regards to the Blaby trial. So they call it a restricted private hire driver licence. And what it basically means is it's a taxi licence, but you can't pick up fares like a taxi operator can. So they won't be able to go into a rank. There'd be no money exchanged at point of transfer or anything like that. So it's a really slimmed down version of the taxi license, but it's more catered for transporting children and people with vulnerable needs. So I mean, it's been well received. It is in its really infancy. I know the team in Blaby are also looking to see if they can develop it into the adult social care market and the social care market, which again will be brilliant if they can, because what it does is it puts more people in the marketplace and hopefully reducing some of the cost. And equally, I think you get a better calibre of person in that marketplace supporting with the delivery of the child's needs.
May I just come back
Briefly.
just very quickly? So can that also then be translated to the volunteer driver sector? I assume you're saying yes on that, but could we look at that? Because this, our DT, response demand transport at Dockstead, are relying on some of those buses, and that would give reassurance to, the general public who probably, watch these programs. Thank you.
I could certainly speak to the licensing authority on that, so we'll put them in contact. Okay.
Thank you, Pat. Les.
Thank you, Chair. I can't resist this. So in another place, that team are actually in my portfolio at Blaby. So and they are supremely proud and excited of the opportunities that it is creating. So if officers are happy and members are happy, I would actually take the feedback personally back to them. I think the other part I'd just say, I think everybody knows I have a kind of insight into this. There's a certain wife called Jackie. I think Amanda raises some really important points, and the reality is this is an incredibly complex arena with so many different individual demands, for want of a better word, for each individual child. And some of the points that Amanda's raised, the Birkett House hubs are going some way to that. By attaching to a mainstream school rather than just the centralised unit in Wigston. So, listening to all the points, I'm guessing there's quite a bit of detail available behind all the work that the team are working on. And I just wonder if there's something that could perhaps be brought back to us that kind of, I'm trying to work out how to phrase it, that kind of categorises the kind of demand. So the children who absolutely do need one-to-one transport, and indeed some of those have got supported transport as well. They're not, solo drivers. How many could go on that collective route management that I think you're looking at, where we actually pick up routes as we go around. So I'm just wondering if there's kind of sort of headline detail that could be provided that kind of gives us a bit of insight into the categorization, really big word, but you know what I mean? The kind of accommodations that we're having to make, just as a pure interest factor for us, if that's possible. So,
thanks, Les. Can you answer that, Pat, at all?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We can supply that information.
Thank you, Pat. Any other comments? Ozzy, you like to wind up?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, it's surprising that the amount of numbers that are going up all the while that they require the special education needs transport. I mean, I can go back, I finished as a special education needs governor in 2013, so I know exactly what special education needs means. And there are complex needs, as has been said, and some children need one-to-one transport, but it's not that easy. It's not that easy to actually say to the nearest school, because a child may need complex needs of a school that is just outside the county, because that's the only one available. So we are governed by where and what child particularly needs, but it is a very complex subject, and I have to take my hat off to the team, because they do take a lot of stress in that department getting the transport for those officers, and I'd like to pay special thanks to the work that they do and I think we do a good job on the whole. I know there are cases where people have applied late and we've not got that transport straight away, but at the end of the day, they do a damn good job, and I'd like to pass my thanks all the way down to the team that do that, and say thank you.
Thank you, Ozzy. I'm going to move on then to, oh, sorry, we're asked to note the report. Agreed? Thank you. I'm going to move on then to item 10, road casualty reduction in Leicestershire. I would like to welcome to the meeting Mr. Graham Compton, Senior Traffic Management Officer at Leicestershire Police. Before I invite Mr. Compton to address us, I want to ask Jana if there's anything you'd like to add, because we've all read the report, and if there's anything you want to highlight before Graham starts.
Thank you, Chair. No, like you say, I'll take the report as read. Just highlight, because there are 2 road safety items on the agenda. I just wanted to be clear. This one is the annual report that you, I think, as a committee now are used to receiving. Covers a large amount of information from the processes that we go through to collate the information, the measures that are in place, and the processes around it as well. It links into our work that we do as a highway authority, but also in partnership through the Road Safety Partnership, which I'm very lucky and proud to chair. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be here today to answer any questions and welcome my colleague Graham to give you an update, and I'll just answer questions as you need to, Chair.
Thank you, Jenna. Well, thank you for being patient, Mr. Compton. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to speak briefly about the close liaison that we've got with Leicestershire County Council, dealing with all matters of road safety and casualty reduction. And I think you'll see that becomes clear as I work through this. As Jana has said, we work through the Leicestershire and Rutland Road Safety Partnership, which Jana chairs. And we meet several times in the year to tackle a host of road safety problems that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. But I just want to run through 1 or 2 of the most important ones today. One item that I want to mention very quickly is we've got a massive problem with drink and drug driving, as I'm sure you're all aware about. Despite the efforts of the Road Safety Partnership over 10, 15 years, the levels of drink drug driving are still going up. And of course, this poses road safety problems straight away. And when we run the campaigns, we find that many of, particularly who are over the drink limit, have been involved in a collision and people have got injured. So it's a really topical subject, this is. Last couple of campaigns we've ran, over 100 drivers in the month for the drink element and 25 drivers plus for the drug element. And please believe me, the drug element is on the rise. There's far too many drivers out there under the influence of cannabis and cocaine. And it's a really big problem for the partnership and for the police. And I'll come on to that subject again later. Jana chairs the board, and the board look after the governance of the road safety unit, and the road safety unit deals with drivers going through the traffic lights on red speeders, and the board look after that. But under that, there is a management team, which I sit on, which does some of the donkey work for the board in terms of the emerging problems that we've got. And one I know you're all interested in because I get lots of emails about it, is the emergence of e-scooters and e-bikes causing incidents and collisions on our roads. We've also looked at the traffic calming protocol for the emergency services, which is a very important document because the emergency services have to get from job to job very quickly. And of course, many roads now are being traffic calmed to get the speeds down. So we're having a look at that and bringing it up to date. Membership of the Road Safety Partnership includes, somebody mentioned national highways, but national highways on the RSP, the National Health Service, all 3 local authorities. So it's quite a depth of knowledge that's on these committees. During the year, the Road Safety Board approved bids from members for projects and initiative totaling some £200,000. That money is not from the taxpayer, it's money that comes from the Road Safety Partnership looking after the road safety unit that deal with speeders and drivers going through the red lights, and I want to make that clear. So we got the £200,000 and we spent it on all sorts of road safety projects across the Horse area. I just want to quickly mention the data group, which is another arm of the RSP. There's a lot of figures being banded around today, and I know your figures are important to you. Well, all our figures come from the data group, and as you probably know, you've heard me talk before, all the collisions that the police go to where there is somebody injured, we fill in, well, we don't actually fill it in now, it's all done on the computer, but a computer report is made out of that casualty, and that is all collected by the data group, who then spill out all the information for us so we know what to concentrate on. Promotion of the campaigns is an important item, and we're very lucky to have our own RSP comms officer who works with the county council and with the police and with other members. And of course, his job recently has changed greatly because he now has to spend a lot of time dealing with the social media, as I'm sure you're aware. It's not a simple matter now of doing a press release and talking to Radio Leicester. There's far more to it, and it's a very, it's an emerging job, a changing job, and one which I hope we've got a grip of. I'll quickly move on to the casualty report, and I did, rather than just put what's happening in Leicestershire down for the fatalities, I've mentioned the other forces in the East Midlands. And unfortunately, despite everything I'm saying about what we're up to, the fatalities over the last 4 years have continued to go up. So we've got some real hard work here to bite into the casualties and see if we can bring them down. And last year in Leicestershire, we dealt with 39. That's 39 lives that's gone. And also, apart from the 39 lives, there are also almost up to 300 serious life-changing injuries. So it's an important business, this is, and one which I personally think doesn't receive enough attention in the national media. It sort of passes over people's heads, apart from the Road Safety Partnership. Just moving quickly on to enforcement. The good news is we're building up the road policing unit that works next to me. And we've now got 29 constables and 5 sergeants in the road policing unit, policing the whole of the force area, including the motorways. But nevertheless, it's an important step forward. I also work closely with the Serious Collision Investigation Unit in the next office who deal with the fatalities and the life-changing incidents. So it's all, we're not working in a silo, we're working in concert with each other to try and pull things together. You've probably heard of the Fatal 4 programme, I hope you have. We've been pushing it now for 10 years and we're running 30 schemes per year, and they're really important events these are, and despite all the publicity that's going out, more or less daily by us, everyone we go to, we're picking up over 30 drivers for either not wearing the seatbelt, using the mobile phone, and occasionally, depending on which site it is, for speeding. So again, we've got to stick at it, and we will do. And just to let you know, we run Fatal 4s in all the county towns of Leicestershire. They all get their share of these operations, which are so important to us. On the non-use of seatbelt, we picked up 650 last year on the Fatal 4 operations and 500 on the mobile phones. And, you know, if you go out there today in your car and you pull up at the traffic lights and you look right or left, you probably see somebody without the belt on or using the mobile phone. I'm afraid it's endemic and it is causing accidents, so we've got to stick to it. Have I got some time, Chairman?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Community Speed Watch, I want to mention that briefly because in cooperation with Leicestershire County Council, we've been using Community Speed Watch volunteers to deal with sites that the public have raised as a speed site. And last year we ran 17 schemes across the force area. Most of them were in Leicestershire County Council. The volunteers performing outside with the SL 700 guns, taking the registered numbers and passing it on to the police. My office, we do the back office work, get the registered keepers and send them warning letters. We like to think that Community Speed Watch is having an impact on drivers. You know, they're not getting points, we appreciate that, but they're getting a warning letter from us, please slow down. Any driver that goes through one of these schemes 3 times gets a knock on the door from a police officer, you know, slow down or you're going to start getting tickets. So it's a really important scheme and we're building up now for this year. Last year we sent 1,700 letters out to people. So I hope it's impacted. One thing I want to mention quickly, because I know many of the councillors are interested in it and get involved in it, are your weight restricted zones. I'm not going to dwell on it, only to say, please, if you do go to meetings, we like the data for any lorries that's passing through weight restricted zones to come via the parish councils if possible, because we cannot react to a single lorry going through a weight restricted zone. But if we get the parish council involved and somebody says, yes, we've had 5, 10 lorries coming through here. I mean, I've got one at the moment at Shepshed. I don't know if there's anybody from Shepshed. But, you know, there's lots of lorries have suddenly got involved because there's a new development there. So if you can let us know through the parish councils, it does help us considerably. And then we contact the driver from our office and warn either the driver or the haulier about what they're doing. It's been very successful, this has, in the last 5 years, to reduce drivers through weight restricted zones, believe me. It's a difficult one because you've got your housing developments now going on all over the county and drivers will take shortcuts, as you know, if there's no intervention. I just want a quick mention of the Safer Roads team. The Safer Roads team have been backed greatly by the Road Safety Partnership since it came into being 3 years ago. And the Road Safety Partnership awarded the Safer Roads team with a Volvo car, so they've got their own vehicle to go out and deal with weight restricted areas, complaints from the public, speeding incidents, etc. At the moment, we're in the process of refreshing the Safer Roads team, and we're looking for more members of the Special Constabulary to join it. And I'll be reporting back to Jana to let you know how that goes. But I just wanted to mention that because it's an important road safety element that we deal with on the ground. I'll mention e-scooters briefly because I know it was a real pain, this one, because of the levels of scooters out there. But from our perspective, we know that there's going to be no legislation on e-scooters for probably 12 months, 2 years with a change of government. So in the meantime, basically, we're stuck with it, not just in Leicestershire, but all over the force country. All we're doing at the moment, on the first stop, we warn and we offer advice, etc. If we catch the same person on a scooter the second time, the machine is confiscated and disrupted. But of course, we're only touching the tip of the iceberg. I know that because as we do that, more and more people are buying these scooters and travelling around on the roads, despite our publicity. Very brief one to mention today. It may not affect you all, and that is the movement of abnormally large loads, of which there are literally hundreds about on our network every day. The ones that you possibly get involved in are the ones which are very high and cannot get under the motorway bridges. So they have to come through the county. They have to come through the county, and they come through the county under escort by the police. But I just wanted to mention that because occasionally we do get reports from parishioners saying, why is this load coming through this road or the other? And it's simply because we cannot get them on what we call the strategic network. I want to conclude, Chairman, by briefly mentioning the enforcement by the road safety unit, the cameras, the static cameras and the mobiles, the camera vans. And again, I have to say, despite everything that we're doing, it's not really good news. We've just taken on a 6th van, which has been given to us through the Road Safety Partnership. So you will see more camera vans on your roads, and I know that'll be a bonus to you. But overall, last year, the Road Safety Unit sent out 58,500 notices of intended prosecution, 58,500. 30,000 drivers took advantage of the speed awareness course and went on a 3-hour course rather than take the points. It's the speed awareness courses where the Road Safety Partnership get the funding from. And I know perhaps you didn't know that, but that's where we get it from. So it's a good funding scheme for us. In addition to that, the Road Safety Unit took on board 230 general complaints from the public. A lot of them come in now through the website, through the electronic system, and it's good. If you've not got the website address, I'll make sure that you've got it for the minutes so that they can report it on it. Just as one or two concluding comments, Chairman, I want to thank all the county councillors, Leicestershire County councillors, because I have dealt with lots of you over the years, and I do know how much attention you do pay to road safety, and it's very, very good liaison that we have, and we really appreciate it. And I think there, Chairman, I think I'll leave it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Compton. Thank you for sharing all that information with us. I'm going to ask colleagues now to any questions, and I've got Rosita first.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much for this report. Really comprehensive and really very welcome. Now, as you said, it's one of those issues that's constantly raised in parish councils with residents, and no matter what you do out there, you can't change the mental behaviour of drivers, or you can't be everywhere 24/7. It's virtually impossible. But people, only a couple of days ago, residents came back to me and said, well, we never see you. There's never anything. But, you know, we know there is. And it doesn't necessarily mean because they haven't seen it, there wasn't anything. So my first point is the killed on the road, the statistics, I assume they include the A5 in Leicestershire, yes? Yeah. So I would suggest, because there's a safety issue on the A5 partnership agenda, that maybe this report can be just forwarded to it, so then, you know, it can be seen, and maybe even you can suggest that you turn up speaking to them, because that again has a wider issue there, because there is the Hinkley Road bridges and whatever else. I also think, and I find that because most everybody reads our county matters, and I think some of these points and should be really highlighted. For instance, 58,000 speed ticket issues. It is quite something. And if our residents would know that this has happened, there might be a different change of mood. And on that point also, you said report weight restrictions. Well, we have tried, but sometimes the emails don't work and things like that. So it might be worth for you, because I certainly would appreciate it, if I'd had an up-to-date email or telephone number I could forward to my parishes. And again, if that were to go into the county matters, I'm sure a lot of people, because in my area, lorries take shortcuts everywhere. With weight restriction. And my last point on that, I could talk forever on this, but I'm not going to. Yeah, this is my last point. It needs to also work in relation with highways and planning, because sometimes planning, for instance, in my area, we've got a Bruntingthorpe aerodrome, the gate is allowed, and so the lorries have to go through a 5.7 ton weight restricted area to get there. They can't go any other way. So they're going through the villages, and I think that needs to be featured in the big scheme of things. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosita. Jenna or Mr. Compton, can you answer any of that?
I think
Or is it more of a statement?
Yeah, we've noted the actions, and I think the only thing I would just say about weight restrictions is generally we can't prevent poor access, but we can have a look at that specific example and pick it up in the action.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that really comprehensive report and review. In terms of I'm saying that you've seen an increase of drink and drug issues on the road. I'm really interested about age profile. Young people don't use Facebook or Instagram really. They're on TikTok and they're Snapchatting all the while. They don't, the mediums that are there, they're not using. And obviously they don't really watch the telly either. They watch streaming services. So I think, is there a thought about how do we utilize advertising a different way? I'm not assuming it's young people, but we all watch TV different nowadays, and I think there is maybe an argument to be looking at how do we engage differently from an advertising point of view. It's not just the normal streams. In terms of Leicestershire, obviously we're not all parished. My division's got one single parish area, and quite unusual, but lots of the areas don't have parishes. So where would they report if they didn't have a parish or a town council? It might be useful for those councillors that don't have parishes within their divisions to know how to do that. And the one thing I wanted to ask, it's not on here and it's something we've already talked about today, is about the flood. And actually one of the things that we're seeing, massive increase of infringement of drivers for driving through floodwater without really having any real sense of safety, or for themselves or for the general public, is what campaigning are we doing around don't drop? You know, I've seen it because I've been looking for it and I've been actively looking for it. But in terms of, you know, if it's at this level, and I've seen the campaign, don't drive through it, you know you're going to get yourself into a pickle. But it's also about the impact it has on the local road network and the safety for other road users. So what work are we doing around safety and general safety and general thought? Because I think a lot of people drive without really paying attention, and that's why they're driving through, oh, I didn't realise that road was closed. So how do we get those messages across, and what work's been doing on that? And anyone who's not done Speedwatch, do it. It's great fun.
Jenna.
Yeah, I think I'll come in and if that's okay, Graham may want to add to it. So first on the advertising, it's a really good point. So we've been having some discussions at the board over the last couple of years, where we've been seeing those statistics come up about how we get messages into different demographics. So I would say that in terms of communities, age, perhaps a lot of our messages are in English, for example. A lot of them are on Facebook, and I'm reliably informed by my own children that I might as well write it in a book and put it in a library if I want anybody to read it. So I think those are very good points. So we had recently a presentation from colleagues over in the West Midlands who had started doing some very direct engagement with different communities in a different way. So through community centres, through existing, I want to say communities again, but existing groups of people that have their own networks, where we perhaps our messages weren't getting through before. So we've just started sort of building on that, and some of that will be about social media, TikToks and other things. Some of that will be about champions within the community. And actually it was really interesting, Graham, as well, wasn't it, to understand that there are different, motivation is the right word, but different rationale for breaking some of what we would consider to be safety rules in amongst different groups of people. And it would surprise you some of the demographics around the drink and drug offences that we found. So we are onto that, and I think we do recognise that. I think we've got a very clear message around the fatal 4 and speeding, but probably with a very set group of people at the moment, and so we're looking to expand that, and like I say, learning from best practice. And Graham does that for as well in terms of the police national learning, so we work together on that. And I think that sort of feeds into the, sorry, not to miss out the middle point, but feeds into the floodwater question, is that, again, I think we probably do a good job with a certain group of people who listen to our messages are getting those, but perhaps not wider. So I think in terms of our flood risk management strategy coming forward, we're taking that as an opportunity to work with our colleagues. I was just looking over at Stephen, who's sitting there, and from comms, who we're working at. So Leicestershire Matters and things like that will obviously get those messages. But I think, again, this committee sort of challenged us to think about how we make those messages more accessible, a little bit more on the mind, and we are working on doing that. But I think the lessons could transfer from both, and so we will feed them into both. I was just going to ask you if Graham's okay with it, just to leave me and Graham to think about the parish question for you and see if we can come up between us with another way of doing that, because I agree with Graham that individual reports from individual incidents at a time. I don't want to sort of promise people something we can't deliver. We won't respond to all of those, but clearly where there's patterns of behaviour and patterns of businesses, particularly, that maybe we could engage with, we want to collate those usefully. So if we just take that away as an action to come back and say what we could do for people in non-parish areas, we'd be happy to do that. Would be Graham.
Thanks, Gemma.
I think that was it, but if I've missed anything, let me know.
Thank you, Gemma. Mr. Compton?
Just one point, Chairman, I should have mentioned it earlier, which the councillors will be interested in. We have a meeting once a month at Force Headquarters with all your area commanders, NPA commanders, and they tell us all the complaints that are emerging in your areas. And it's a very, very useful meeting. Once a month we do this. So because they're taking the complaints in locally about the issues that we've been talking about, and sometimes we don't always get it at the centre. So we've introduced this meeting, and it's been very, very useful to get the road safety message across, and for dealing with the local complaints by your residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Compton. Les?
Thank you, Chair. Where do we start? So, when I were a lad, you used to be told off for scooting. Thanks, Oz. For scooting your cycle on the footway when I were a lad. There is a lot of commentary and noise and concern about the use of e-scooters. The fact of life is, in Leicestershire, they are illegal. Simple as that. Have I seen people on e-scooters at night without lights happily travel past a police car? Yes. And that's a very sad thing to say, because I'm very pleased with my area team, or the B team, and they work incredibly hard. But I think there's this basic principle of when is the law not the law? And I go back to when I were a lad, if you got caught scooting cycle on the pavement, you got told off by the local beat sergeant. So I think there's a fundamental point here about behavioural change and education about what is legal and what is not legal. And at some point, one government will, or whichever political persuasion it is, will get an answer on what we're going to do about e-scooters or supercharging e-bikes now, apparently. But I think there's wider issues here as well at play. I'm sure as fellow members, we all get endless inbox emails about parking on the footways. That is a road safety issue because it's a pedestrian safety issue. And it seems to be that these are the battles that we never seem to get to an end of. They are constantly in our inboxes. In my division, there's a very, very informative gentleman who is very, very concerned about endless pavement parking because of the obstruction, particularly for partially sighted or wheelchair users or mobility scooter users. So I think there's lots of things that we actually need to up the education and behavioural change on. But coming back to the weight restricted ones issue, what I would have a concern about is, you know, we all get this coming into our inbox. As I understand it, unless the police visibly monitor it, entering the weight restricted zone, travelling through the weight restricted zone and out the other side of the weight restricted zone, and not have a justifiable work related reason to have done it, they are not breaching the weight restricted zone. So I think my query would be, you know, part of my ward division is Cosby. It's a 7.5 ton weight restricted village, full stop. And one of the endless complaints is HGVs traversing through the village. So how would a resident be able to determine, you know, we can see it's an HGV, but whether it's legitimately passing through or it's actually not legitimately passing through? And then if they are all reported, how you guys at Force HQ can disseminate what that HGV was doing and should they issued with an FPN. So I'm really fascinated how the system can actually manage the opportunities. So back to you, Chair. And
thank you, Les. We'll try and answer that. Mr. Compton.
Yeah, thank you. No, you're quite right about the enforcement. And basically, the way we've tackled that is through this system whereby the public report to us that a lorry, and usually sent us a photograph. None of these drivers are prosecuted through this system. We actually pick the phone up and ring the haulier or the driver, whatever, and speak to him or her. So we aren't prosecuting people, you're quite right, because in terms of police resources, it is very labour intensive to actually police a weight restricted zone to that extent where we've got a ticket. So in the last few years, we've dealt with it proactively. And in actual fact, it has been successful. It's been successful. I mean, I dealt with this business, let's say 5-10 years ago, and I know the number of complaints that's coming in now, despite all the developments that you've got all over the county. And the number of complaints that we're getting are less. So I can only assume, you know, that there's less breaches unless a lot of people aren't reporting the breaches. But does that answer your question?
Thank you. Les, I'm just mindful of time. We've got another speaker and we've got other business to do. So if you can come back as long as it's quick.
It kind of, but I'm going to suggest that quite a chunk of it is people who just stop reporting because nothing happens. But I think, if I may, Chair, very quickly, can I also commend the officers, because I know they put a lot of effort, as in highway officers, into, for the life of me, I can't remember what it's called, it's the Highway Management Traffic Plan or something like that, which actually takes a positive approach to keeping HGVs, particularly construction traffic, out of our little villages. So thank you for that one.
Hilary, questions, comments?
Thank you. I'll be very brief. 3 points I'd like to make, particularly on, first of all, floods and flooding and roads closed. I assisted in getting flood warning signs, 3 of them put up in my village of Barrow-on-Soar regarding Slash Lane, that is always flooded everywhere. These have been hugely successful. There are 3 entrances to the village and it flashes like a school sign telling you Splash Lane is closed and the depth of water. I have now been asked, and I've been in touch with the department to see if this can be put on a WhatsApp, so people coming through from the next village don't even start the journey that way. They know immediately. And the officers within Anne's department are looking into this. We will have raised it before Christmas, but obviously it's taking a bit of time. It's not, they don't think this, it goes back to the manufacturer. I have had so many compliments on it. It has saved so much of people trying to turn into this road and then finding it's flooded or even setting out there. So that is one thing I'd like, and I think if it could be spread out, it would save a lot of money and time. E-scooters. Do we, I find a lot of them are going to the schools and colleges because they're going up my road at school time, and it's main route to the high school, Humphrey Perkins. I see them in the town, in Loughborough, going through the marketplace. So I presume some of those are college and university students. Do you communicate to the universities and colleges and schools that it is illegal to use these on the public roads and pavements? And weight restrictions, again, I find, because I have British Gypsum, many developments, and I have the quarry. So we get all sorts of lorries coming through. On the whole, working with the hauliers and all the companies like British Gypsum, quarries and everything, they can track their lorries to the nth degree. And they have before now, I understand, and you may know about this, have the hauliers have either sacked the drivers or they've lost the contract with whoever it is. And I've also had in previous years, and this might be encouraging, I don't know, I'd like to know whether this happened. We had one fairly big development in the village, and at every entrance to the village, the developer put up a sign and said, if they come through the village, they could get fined up to £2,500. And that was on a big red sign at every entrance. We didn't have very many lorries coming through. So I think it's working that way, I would like to think, but I'm really concerned about the schools and colleges, where they are informed. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. Jenna, Mr. Compton, any comments?
So I think we were probably going to say the same thing, that in terms of our road safety education messages where we are working in schools, that is put forward. I think the other points you raise, I think probably for us to take away and see if we can replicate elsewhere and where that would be appropriate. That's it from us. Do you want to go, Greg?
The only thing I'll add, Hilary, is that the fire service are doing a tremendous job as far as the floods are concerned in getting those messages out. And we spoke about it at the Road Safety Partnerships. Well, to be fair, we've not got casualties. The water's not deep enough. But no, the fire service are very concerned about it because it swallows up their resources, and yet you still get people trying to go through your neck of the woods in 2 foot of water, and you just can't understand why. So probably we'll never convince everybody about the flood warnings, but if we can keep 90% off or 95%, we will be making some progress, Chairman.
Thank you. No other comments. Ozzy, anything you'd like to wind up on?
I'll just say that, you know, we will definitely look at putting the figures in the Leicestershire matters for the speeders. We try very hard, you know, to make sure that we work the officers work very hard on road safety. And, you know, I commend them what they do. And I certainly commend Graham, because he was my boss in 1980 for the work that he's done, you know, on road safety, because he was, I think when I first met you, Graham, you're the traffic inspector, you know, so, no, he's done a great job. And I'd like to finish by saying thank you, Graham, for the community work that you've done, you know, in your position, all those years you worked looking after road safety. So thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Ozzy. Mr. Compton, thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon, and thank you very much for sharing all the information. It's been very knowledgeable, so really appreciate that. We do have some other business to continue with. You're quite welcome to stay, or we understand if you want to leave. Okay. So, members, we're asked to note the report. Agreed? Thank you. Moving on to item 11, development for the Leicestershire County Council Road Safety Strategy. Again, this comes down to Jana. but we've all read the report and understand it. Jenna, is anything you'd like to add before I move to members?
Apologies, Chair. Just very quickly, if that's okay, just because it is just a slightly unusual way of bringing you the report in terms of the strategy. Normally, we would attach the strategy and ask you for comments here and now. What we're doing is letting you know that we will be sending it to you, just because of the way the meeting schedules work. And I don't want you to think that I'm ungrateful about the amount of money coming into the department, but we've got quite a hectic schedule of consultations coming up this year, and so we didn't want to miss our window on this. But I think it is fair to say that actually what the strategy is doing is largely collecting at what we already do. We've revised the targets, and we've got some long-term targets on a 0 deaths on the road, and we can talk about that in the questions if people would like to. But I think it really does sort of just help to explain to people and yourselves. I think when we get that question about what do you do, what are you doing, actually we do a lot. You can see that from the previous report, but it perhaps isn't collected in one useful place, and then that we can use to feed into other consultations, used to inform the local transport plan that we're working on, the highways design guide that you mentioned. So it really is about formalising our approach, and I think just in that I would say that certainly the partnership working has been critical to that. I would absolutely echo what Mr. O'Shea said in terms of those relationships, and somebody to advocate for the investment in road safety is really important. We couldn't do it on our own, and just collecting that, being really open and transparent about what we do, and that will help then in terms of how we're performing, which is what we're bringing to every year against those objectives. It just puts things in the right order. So our intention is to share the document with yourselves and the engagement at the end of March. I always have to say, don't I, end of March, beginning of April, just in case I missed the end of March deadline, because there's an Easter period, which makes it a little bit difficult. We'd really welcome any feedback you have on that, but hopefully it's a very familiar kind of approach to you, and one that we've taken on board your feedback for a number of years through this forum. That's it, thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Any comments, questions? Rosita.
Yes, thank you, Jenna. Just a quick one. For years, I've been an advocate because the A5 from High Cross, Smoking to Hollow, and eventually, you know, I got that yellow scheme there, which doesn't make any difference. So in the strategy, are the stretches of the A5 worked in, you know, the stretches we have in Leicestershire for people to comment on, or is it just generally, you know, just talk me around that, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the strategy itself will kind of highlight how we'd work in those areas. What we'll do is then annually, like we continue to do, is highlight any schemes. Obviously, the A5 itself is national highways, so there's lots of interactions, and we would look at that. So I think what you'd have from the strategy is a commitment to, you know, not getting lost in the sort of silos of national highways and ourselves, but it would be through the kind of annual work programmes that you would see the specific schemes come forward. But we do work collectively on the A5. We've been looking at the reasons for behind some of those instances along that stretch, and we'll continue to do that as well.
Thanks, Jenna. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. And I wasn't sure whether to raise it on this one or the previous report, and this is on the cluster sites because it's sort of the paper's right in the middle. But I suppose from a strategy point of view, the question really was about how will we be measuring and monitoring, because I'm assuming the strategy is looking at designing out high volume areas of accidents, and that you know, that will be part of the strategy. But the cluster sites always worry me because I've got 3 in my division alone, just because of where I'm based. So I do understand that. But it's how will the strategy look to alleviate the pressure on really high volume sites in terms of accidents? And I suppose that will come in the strategy, but that's sort of the question.
Jenna?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think you're right. What we've seen is less of the traditional cluster sites coming through the stats, because we've obviously been putting in schemes to do that, but you do get the criteria is set out, and then looking at the various reasons for that. So the strategy will sort of retain the commitment to looking at either sites or stretches of road where there's patterns of behaviour. The actual solutions then I think are really important, that we don't sort of have a blanket approach, that we actually understand what's going on in the area and the factors to that. And so again, that will come through the annual programmes, but the strategy kind of it cements, I suppose, our commitment to understanding those patterns and dealing with them in whatever way the investigation suggests we should.
Thank you, Jenna. David?
Rosita mentioned relationship to the A5. Is this a comprehensive approach across the whole city and county? The reason I ask you is that because with the M1 splitting the county in two, the number of accidents we see on the M1 is quite frightening. What is it? Once a week there's a pile up or something happens. There might be a fatality or an injury, but it's pretty persistent. Do we include looking at the motorway network as well as county roads?
Thank you, David. Jenna?
So the Leicestershire and Rutland Road Safety Partnership, as Graham said, had national highways on, and the police area covers that. So in terms of understanding behaviours, road safety messages, statistics, we absolutely do include that, and we work together on that. What you won't see from the strategy is Leicestershire County Council highways as a highways authority intervening with measures on the M1, because that is National Highways network. But in terms of shared learning approaches, perhaps how incidents on the M1 interact with our network, cross sort of messaging, all of that we do through the partnership, and we do work together. So it's not separate, but we won't be, I guess, spending our money and investment on the M1, because that is National Highways route. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Jenna. So just looking around, no further comments. Ozzy, final word?
Just to say thank you for all the work that the partnership does. I'm very grateful, and I'm sure the residents of Leicestershire are as well.
If you're okay, Chair, I'd just like to highlight a couple of things, because we have had the National Highways and Transport results, that's the annual survey, etc. So that updates a number of the indicators. So I just wanted to highlight for you a couple in relation to that. The first one was the overall satisfaction with the condition of the highway. Well, that's reduced substantially from 33% to 22%. But I wanted to stress to you, and it's the same across a number of indicators, while our performance has gone down, we've still remained in the top quartile for that indicator, which says that our comparator authorities have similarly gone down. So I just wanted to set that context to you, because when you read it in first reading, some of those indicators we have deteriorated in performance, but actually that very much reflects the national picture. And what we're doing is we're kind of still retaining at that kind of top level of performance there. So I just wanted to pick that one out. Only other one I would pick out for you is percentage of principal and unclassified roads in need of structural maintenance. That has increased. Now I'm sure you'll get that after the earlier conversation we've had about our programme going forward for next financial year on H&T. So the only thing I'd point out there, we're likely to see that trend continue unless that Network North money, which we've already discussed today, does come through. If that comes through, chances are we'll have a much better chance at seeing some improvements to the network, or at least slowing down the rate of deterioration. If it doesn't come through, we'll expect that trend of deterioration to continue. So I just wanted to highlight that. That was all, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Members, any comments, questions?
I have a particular issue with byways open to all traffic and green lanes in the Beaver division, and it's hard to get the focus on that, and some of them aren't really getting appalling condition now, so that there can't be access even almost by agricultural tractors, and it's about having that as a focal point and a way to try and get some of those situations resolved, because some of them are getting terrible. They're used and abused by off-road vehicles, and it's remediation work to make them better than they are now, and then maybe stopping usage in the future is a real challenge in my area. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anne?
Very aware, and it's the same across the county, and as you're aware, because I know you've been very involved in this, we have no statutory duty to upgrade those or maintain them for vehicle use, and as a result they've always kind of quite naturally fallen much lower down the priority list. So when we're stuck for funding, unfortunately it doesn't spread that thin. All I can say is we can look at it in the future depending on how much funding does come through.
Amanda?
Apologies, just a couple of things. Noticed that the congestion numbers had really sort of increased, but also that the emissions of the vehicles in counties control had also increased, and I didn't know if you had a sort of sense of what was behind that, please.
And over to you.
Sorry, I was just getting to the right page there on my documents. In terms of the emissions, and Nicola will correct me there, they're usually fairly in arrears, aren't they? So and just in the absence of finding the, rather than searching for the paper, usually in terms of the number, if that's 2022, whether it's then coming out pandemic and we're seeing that bounce back coming up there. Yeah, Nicola's shaking it, nodding her head at me in terms of the years. I kind of think that'd be some of it. There's always going to be, unfortunately, we're still dealing with increasing, use of vehicles, etc. We've got a bit of transition to EVs, but that's still early days, isn't it? So ultimately, we've still got more vehicles running around emitting, and I think that's going to be combined with the kind of bounce back post-pandemic, when we really did see some changes there in terms of the emissions. Sorry, your other one was, your first point?
Was the overall satisfaction with the congestion. So clearly more use on the roads, I get that, but obviously that's 23-24 data. So is there any specific issues that we're sitting behind congestion areas, that kind of thing?
Genuinely, it can be very difficult, because as you will understand, these are kind of stated preference. It's people's perception, isn't it? So it can be sometimes based on their last experience when they were out and about, or, it's very difficult sometimes to point to a direct cause that is factual. So I'd be difficult to hazard a real view about exactly why that's happening. We know what's happening in terms of peak hour trips and, the time taken in peak hours for journeys. We've got metrics on that, but it doesn't always tie in with the response in terms of satisfaction. They don't always align. But again, that comes back to people's perceptions.
Thank you, Anne. Nicola, did you want to come in?
Sorry, I just wanted to add on that point that we had actually seen an improvement in our quartile position since the previous year on that. So last year it had been third quartile. So in terms of our comparison with other authorities, we had actually seen an improvement for that indicator.
Okay, Nicola. Any other comments? No. Les, briefly, please.
Very briefly, just a real technical question, but it's not really, it's just a performance reporting question, I'm guessing. The very last one, average vehicle speed on locally managed A roads, diddly-dee. Last reporting period, second quarter 2022.
Nicola, are you answering that?
That's the Department of Transport data, so there is a lag in that, I'm afraid.
Thank you. No other comments. Ozzy, final word?
I think the report is as it is, and we're still doing very well, and I'm quite proud of where we are.
Thank you very much, and I'll congratulate you on that. Moving on then to item 13, date of the next meeting. Date of the next meeting is scheduled for the 6th of June 24 at 2 p.m. Item 14, any other items the chairman has decided to take as urgent? There's one, and it's a very brief statement from Mr. Flynn.
It isn't. Thank you, Chair. It was literally a commentary back to Anne and her team. Amanda was there yesterday. So we had the Blaby district area flood drop-in session yesterday. I don't think I've ever seen as many environmental agency staff in one place in one go. But clearly there were a lot of flood officers from here as well. And I would just like to commend them. It was absolutely excellent.
Thank you for that, Les. So I'll thank you all very much for your attendance. I'll now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.